Hello, everyone. This is Dr. B from Steps to the Future, welcoming you to this week's College and Career Conversations with Dr. B. I am again, as you always know, I'm always so thrilled to be here and to be able to bring another career professional to share with all of you so that you can share it with the young folks in your lives. It's so important that we have these conversations with our students as often as possible to help them understand that there is so much out there for them to do. So, again, welcome. And before I go into something, I actually want to share my screen because I want to remind people about the Black College Awareness Fair that our guest Trinity Wilson talked about last week. So, just in case you did not have an opportunity to register, so here we have, so again, this is their Instagram page that I showed you last week, Palo Alto AKAs. And you want to go on to their Instagram page, and you can see here on this particular post, the Black College Awareness Fair. So there is when you go on there, you can see a QR code where you can scan to register, or you can go to this URL and register. It's also on my Facebook page. So that's something that you can find there. But again, make sure you do that. That is this coming Saturday. It is 1 p.m. Eastern Time, 1 to 4. So it's free, it's virtual. So please share it with people that you know to make sure that they have the opportunity to see this. Okay, so I am going to stop sharing with that. And as I get ready to, whoops, let me go back here. There we go. As we get ready to get started, go grab your drink, some water, whatever you're going to do, a quick snack. Take a few minutes, not a few minutes, take 30 seconds to share this out because I'd love to see comments and see who's going to join us. So I will see you back here in 30 seconds. Okay, and we are back. And we have with us today Sydney Floryanzia, who is our guest today. So let me just give you a little brief introduction. But before I introduce Sydney, I have to talk about how I came to know Sydney. So those of you who know me, you know I've been doing these for a little bit, trying to show young folks, Black and Brown career professionals, because we know how much representation matters. So it's so important that we allow students to see people that look like them out there in so many career fields that we have. One of my earlier guests, and I actually want to say it was from 2020, was Dr. Jamila Simpson from North Carolina State University. What has been so amazing is how that friendship with Dr. Simpson it's the gift that keeps on giving. Through her, I've met different people. That's one of the reasons Sydney is on today. Through something Dr. Simpson had posted on LinkedIn, then I made a comment on the post, and it went back and forth. And then I invited Sydney to be a guest, and she graciously said yes. So, Dr. Simpson, even if you're not watching this evening, if you watch it on the replay, your ear should be burning because you are forever a superhero to me. And I'm just so thrilled that I had the opportunity to get to know you. And I can't wait until I get a chance to see you in person again. It's been a while. It's been a while. So, Sydney, I'm going to do a brief introduction and then we're going to go into like who you are. So, Sydney Floryanzia is a PhD student at the University of Washington, where her research uses chemical engineering to develop and improve medicine for the brain. She is currently studying the blood brain barrier, and she's going to tell us a little bit about that, drug delivery to the brain, and therapies for degenerative brain diseases. Sydney is also a science communicator and advocates for diversity in STEM, having shared her experiences as a Black woman in engineering in a TEDx Teen Talk, a Chevron Super Bowl commercial, news articles, and podcasts. And just so that you know, Sydney is currently taking requests for STEM related speaking engagements and classroom presentations. And I will make sure that you have her contact information and that you also have a link to her TED Teen Talk. Sydney, welcome. It is a thrill. Yeah. So tell us a little bit. So first of all, welcome. I think I cut you off a little bit there. As I said, I am so thrilled to have you here as a guest, and this is amazing because just in reading through your bio and some of the other things, you are already an accomplished young woman.
Thank you. Yeah, I before we get too far, I wanted to bounce back to the Dr. Simpson connection because her work is so foundational to my journey as a scientist, and so like all the great stuff that I've been able to do starts really from my foundation that I got working with a lot of the programs that she started. So one of my first, I guess, experiences with STEM was through her Kyron Anderson Academy that she used to. She might still, but definitely back then she was very pivotal in running. And the year that I went, it was about like the theme was pharmacy, and I had never like really like what kid knows about the pharmaceutical field beyond like, hey, that's a window I go to get my medicines. And so that was really my first, I guess, tangible, immersive experience with STEM and medicine specifically. I remember they had like a dissection part of it, and I got to hold a brain as a kid, and of course that like stays with you. And I was like, man, what if I work with brains someday? And I do now. And yeah, and it was the first time like she had like little like kid lab coats for the little pharmacist. I was walking around rocking my little jacket. And then, because of course she's as modest as can be. So
Yes, she is.
at one of the speakers that she had brought in said, "Oh yeah, and Dr. Simpson was the first Black person to graduate with a degree in meteorology from NC State." We're all like, "Whoa!"
I know.
Amp the hero thing. But yeah, so just before we got any further, just wanted to extend my thanks to her and just all the work, and of course people like you, like those experiences really matter and carry on through people's careers. Like I am a product of a lot of the work that people put into reaching back and reaching out to the next generation. And that's one reason why I am so avid about my own outreach and things, because I personally know how important it was. So
Okay, that is so good. And Dr. Simpson, again, if you get a chance to hear this, and I'll tag you in it when I post it on LinkedIn, so you understand how important you are to people. So Sydney, tell me a little bit about who you were as a high school student.
So I first heard about engineering specifically at another camp. This one, an engineering camp at NC State. And I had gone to that camp in middle school. And that's when I had gotten this whole revelation about, oh my gosh, engineering, reverse engineering the brain. That's so cool. That's definitely what I'm going to do. So I went to that camp maybe 7th, 8th grade. And so I went into high school with that focus. So I think I was extremely focused in high school. I was always kind of, like I knew I was passing through, like that this was not kind of the end all be all. Like everything I was doing was like trying to get to college, trying to get to that engineering school, and all that. So I had actually started doing research in high school. So this is something that I figured I should start saying like kind of more publicly. If you're a high school student, you can get a
Mhm.
lot of like experience, like, hey, can I tour XYZ, blah, blah, blah. Like I got a chance to do it through my school, but also like you're a kid. So you're a kid and you're old enough to not break things. So
Right.
if you want to tour, I got a bunch of tours of pharmaceutical facilities. I toured Novartis, I toured Biogen in high school. And then through some perfect, because I lived near NC State, so I was able to, again, like those camps, kind of like network. Oh, can I work in your lab? And so I had 2 research experiences, 2 summers of high school, which really kind of solidified, okay, I really want to do research. I want to be in the lab setting. I really want to do chemie. So by the time I got to college, I was able to say, look, I have already developed these skills and things.
So I think you just said a couple of things there that I really want to highlight. The fact that students can start in high school doing research, but you can't wait for the research to come to you. You have to go looking for it. And I like that you were able to take advantage of those camps and to learn about what your interests were. But the other thing that you said was network. I think sometimes people think networking is a dirty word, but you were able to take people that you had met in the camp. Plus your tenacity and your grit and going out there and asking, can I tour this place? I love that idea. To ask people, can I tour your facility? You know, what do I have to do that? I don't think enough. Well, partly because with COVID, students have gotten a little bit reluctant to put themselves out there, and then we also had to be careful. But I think it's important for students to know that all you can do is ask. If somebody says no, then they say no, but you have to ask. And I think they would be surprised how many people are willing to support them and learning about whatever it is they're trying to learn about.
Yeah, I think someone had told me this. I was in college by the time I had heard it. But I still use it to this day. It's like you don't want to self-select yourself out, right? So a
Oh, I
lot
like
of times we don't apply for things or we don't like reach out because like, oh, like what if they say no? Well, if they say no, you're in the exact same position as if you don't reach out. But if you
exactly.
reach out, there's the possibility that they could say yes. So you don't want to be the one to, take the opportunity out of your hand just because you didn't
Mhm.
apply for it or anything. But yeah, for kid networking, all you gotta do, oh my God, thank you for your time, blah, blah. And also, do you know which high school student in your lab? If not you, do you know someone who would? But again, thank you so much for your time. And
That is so important. That
that's
is so important.
so there you go.
So when you so throughout high school, well, you said in high school you went to a couple of camps at NC State. Were they both at NC State?
Yes, yeah, everything I did was through NC State, partially because I lived near there, so it was kinda like up the road.
Okay.
Especially now with like, COVID has forced a lot of virtual things.
Mm.
So now there's less regional dependence. I'm sure some camps are still going online. So if you don't live near somewhere where they offer those, perhaps there's some online things that we can look into.
Okay. So then you graduate from high school and so was NC State the school that you always had planned to attend, or tell us a little bit about your whole college admissions journey.
Yes. So I didn't want to go to NC State because I was like, oh, well, I live near NC State. I've always done everything through NC State. My parents went to NC State. It's too obvious. Like, no, I can't go to NC State. So I had my this is probably not the best thing to do, but I was kind of like, I don't know what schools to apply for. My dad was like, okay, NC State, Georgia Tech, Ohio State, Howard. I was like, okay. So I applied to those, got into all those. Then I was like, not really looking at state, but I did the college tours and everywhere that I loved about the
Hmm.
campuses or the things that reminded me of state. Um,
Yeah.
and I really did genuinely love state, but I think I had to go on the tours to just because I think I kind of took state for granted because I was like, oh, everywhere feels like that, but not everywhere felt like it.
Okay.
But I would have known that if I hadn't have tried other places. But the opportunities and the resources and
Mhm.
the professors that I had already made connections with through my research at NC State, like they're looking back, it was 100% the right decision. I was warring with it at the time. I was like, but ultimately NC State was the home.
Okay. Okay. And I just wanted to anybody that's joining in or watching this on the replay, we have with us this evening Sydney Floryanzia, who is a PhD student, and she's going to talk to us a little bit about that as we move on. Please make sure if you have any comments or questions, please join the conversation. We'd love for you to talk with us about what you're hearing. What questions do you have of Sydney in order to use this information with young folks in your life or young folks that you may work with? So again, this is for you. So make sure that you join in, and hey, make sure you share this out to people. So Sydney, when you went into NC State, did you know first right off bat what you were going to major in, or was that something that you were still thinking about?
So I did, but that is not the common route. Like
Right.
I say that just so that if you don't know what you want to do, you're not like, oh, I'm behind. I just
Right.
because I had a lot of early exposure to STEM, to engineering, to these challenges to these different types of engineering. I guess I went through that selection process just earlier. So I had done that in high school. So I knew at the time that I came to State that I was definitely going to do chemical engineering. I was going to do it for these reasons, for these future pursuits and things. And then I had I did a lot of, my mother would say, informational interviews. So you'd find people that maybe majored in chemical engineering, maybe majored in biomedical engineering, maybe majored in XYZ other engineering or science or whatever. And you kind of see what they do, kind of see what their day-to-day is like, see if you would like that. I actually, it's another thing. I started looking up, like, okay, what job would I want to have in the future? And then you can do that through LinkedIn. Like, what job would I want to have in the future? And then who are they recruiting? So you can kind of look into what backgrounds they want. And so I knew that I wanted to do somewhere in medicine. I didn't know if I wanted to do benchtop or industry. Still don't know if I want to do benchtop or industry. But either way, I knew I could do chemie and do both. So, yeah.
So why chemical engineering?
So I actually got intercepted. So I was going to, so in my mind, I was like, okay, I want to do, so and this is what I tell people too. There's 1,000 engineerings. So just kind of like seeing the list of engineers and picking one is not really an efficient way to pick an engineering. What you want to do is, what do you want to do with it? So I knew that I wanted to work on this challenge of reverse engineering the brain. And it's like, okay, I can do that through electrical, materials, chemical, biomedical, bioag. It was textiles. I could do it through a lot of different engineerings, which I know now. But back then I said, okay, brain, bio, so biomed, because it has bio in the name. So that's the engineering that I can do medicine with. So I was at a state event. Again, so also another thing, if you live near a university, a lot of their like open houses and things are open, so you don't actually have to be graduating to go to the open houses. So I started going to the open houses maybe freshman, sophomore year. And again, I was able to ask these questions and kind of get the stuff nailed out before I was entering college, just because I was in the space. So I was at the chemical engineering booth and I was like, yeah. And the girl was like, what do you want to do? And I was like, oh, I want to work with the brain. I want to do medicines. I want to do biomed. And she was like, you can do that with chemical engineering. And I was like, and then she was explaining kind of what chemical engineering is, which admittedly, we have a PR, not problem, but we're just not the best at advertising what we do. So I do, here's what chemical engineering is. So basically, like any process, you need chemical engineers to make, right? And so you might have something that works at the benchtop, but how are you going to get it in a form that people can use, people can buy, you can produce at the large scale? That's all chemical engineers. But then if you also, if you want to work inside the body at the cellular, at the chemical level, that's chemical engineering. If you want to work in tandem with the body at the biological scale, kind of more prosthetic, surgical robotics, that sort of stuff, that's biomed. And so I was like, oh, well, I want to work on the protein level. I want to work at the cellular level. I want to work at the chemical level. And then potentially do things at the larger scale with process. So that was kind of why I chose chemical engineering. And then also I I had made known what I wanted to do to these
Right.
people that I had networked with, and I was like, "Hey, so I kind of had this idea of wanting to do engineering in the brain, and I don't really know how to do that." And
Mhm.
then someone said, "Hey, I had a student, Dr. Lisa Bullard." She said, "I had a student who did that. She was a chemical engineer, and she currently works on neuroscience challenges." That woman that she was talking about was Dr. Elizabeth Nance, who is now my PI at
Oh, okay.
Washington. And so I met with her, and she was telling me all about how chemical engineering was uniquely suited for studying these problems in the brain because of this flow. I could talk about it forever, but that mentorship also kind of continued to steer me in the chemical engineering direction.
Okay.
So talking to people, that I guess is the summative.
Okay, I love that. I love your enthusiasm about what you're doing, and I think that's so important for young folks to understand that there are a lot of things that you can do, and you can find out more by asking questions. We really have to get comfortable with asking questions, asking people. So you talked about you did informational interviews. How did you go about um, requesting those informational interviews? Because that's something I'm always encouraging students to do. And they're like, oh, I don't want to do that. I'm nervous. And I'm like, but how will you know what that work is like if you're not actually talking to people? You don't want to wait until you are in the third year of your college program and you say, oh, I don't think I really want to do this. So anything that you can find out beforehand is fantastic. So tell me, how did you go about getting your informational interviews?
Well, I will be honest. So my mother is a career counselor. She works in the cooperative education department at NC State now, but she did work in a similar. She worked at the high school level, career
Mhm.
and all that such. So she definitely had a lot of hand in. Hey, these are some things you need to do. As I was coming up, and so again, like the kind of the email template of hello, like I am XYZ grade in high school. I'm really interested in this. And I came across LinkedIn is really good, but I didn't have a LinkedIn really until I was older.
Okay.
So it was more so when I went to the camps, I would just kind of, hi, nice to meet you. Do you know anyone that does blah, blah, blah? And then they would introduce me to someone who, like, it was very like pre-internet type networking, even though we had the internet. It's just because
Right.
like I was younger, so I had like less access to
Yeah.
the world. So it was really like person to person, trying to network. And then of course when I started doing the tours, that kind of opened up even
Mhm.
more, because I would ask the person, I like, as they were touring me, I was like, so how did you get into this field, or what was your degree, or why did you decide to start working here, and that sort of thing. So yeah, kind of, hey, do you know anyone?
Okay. Well, but see again, if you don't ask, you won't get anyone. All they can do is say no. For anyone again that's joining us, that's just tuning in, we are with Sydney Floryanzia, who is a PhD student at the University of Washington in chemical engineering. She did her undergrad work at North Carolina State University, and Sydney is a firm believer in increasing the diversity in the STEM areas. So that's why I'm so thrilled to have her here, because when you look at the numbers and you see the number of Black and Brown people overall, but then when you even disaggregate that a little bit more and look at the number of women in that are Black and Brown in the STEM fields, it's pretty sad. It's pretty sad that the numbers are still that low. So I'm so glad Sydney's able to be here with us this evening to talk about what it is that she's interested in and what she's actually doing to get to her career goal. One of the things that you said that I loved is you talked about students not being so concerned about what their major is and more about what they want to do. I know one of the things I always ask my students now, um, what problems do you want to solve?
Mhm.
And then you can go from there, because as you found out, there are so many pathways to solving a problem that's of interest to you. It doesn't have to be the one that you know about right away or the one that immediately comes to mind. You found out, oh, wait a minute, I can do this with chemical engineering when I thought that it was only biomed that I could do it with. So again, having information is so important. With having that information, you can make an informed decision about what you want to do, and you can also see all the possibilities as you shared with us. So tell me about some of the work that you did. So as an undergrad at NC State, besides getting to do some research, what was the most interesting or the most unusual research or internship that you were involved in that stands out for you?
Yeah, so we actually had a really cool opportunity at NC State to be part of what's called the Census undergraduate research competition. And so what that was is there's one university for each of, it was 13 countries at the time. I think it's gone up since then. But yeah, so one team from all of these 13 countries would all come together. And well, before we came together, we were all assigned this one problem. So every year, the census organization like releases a challenge, and for our year, it was sensing the concentration of vancomycin, which is an antibiotic in the blood, because vancomycin is really useful, but it's really difficult to kind of figure out what concentration is in the blood. So people are kind of hesitant to administer it because there can be dangers with overdose or whatnot. So that was a challenge. And so they dispatched the challenge. All the teams from each of the 13 countries would work on it for a year and then come together in the Netherlands for the final competition and kind of see how everybody went about solving the problem. So it was really cool because we had so many differences, right? Like we were from such different parts of the world, such different cultures, all these things, but we had so much in common because we had all been working on the same problem for all this time. And then I remember it was like, oh, we had thought about using quantum dots, but we abandoned it because of XYZ. So we used this printing. And someone's like, oh, we did the quantum dots and we solved that challenge by doing this. I was like, oh, that's so cool. And so I think that, so in addition to just being excellent from a scientific and also bringing in the business side of things, because we had to talk to clinicians and all this kind of stuff, but also really opened up my worldview because people were like, oh, like, would you consider taking a job in Europe? And I was like, oh yeah, I can do that, and it was just something I had never considered before then. So yes, that was probably one of my favorite science endeavors in undergrad.
And I think, again, you just keep dropping these wonderful pieces of information for young folks out there. The idea that how it expanded your worldview. I mean, here you took a problem and you took a year to work on it. I know, as I'm thinking of some of my students now. They're probably thinking, "Oh God, if I have to work on something for more than like 2 hours, I'm done with it." But to take this problem, have a year to work on it. So think of all the skills that you're learning. So in addition to your research skills, you're working with a team. You're learning how to do your reporting and to look at data and to do analysis and just the networking and just being able to work with other people is such an important skill that I think often gets people don't sometimes see the importance of it, how important it is to be able to work as part of a team. So very seldom are we doing any work in isolation. So even though, I'm here and it's just me by myself in my business, I have colleagues that I'm working with all the time to get information from. I'm reaching out to my colleagues on LinkedIn to get information. I've had the opportunity to meet you. So even though it feels isolating, you're not. There's no way I could do this without having guests, without having someone like you come on. So when you graduated from NC, well, even before you graduated, how did you go about finding a PhD program that was suitable for you?
Yeah. So again, I I think I had just a very, very specific focus, which I don't know if that's usual. But for me, I had wanted to just work on this brain related problems since middle school. And so I had all this time to kind of whittle down
Mhm.
and look at all the potential avenues that I could take. And so I had a concrete list of kind of where I wanted to take this research. And so then it was just a matter of what universities are doing this research and will let me do this research from a chemical engineering perspective specifically, because I had, at this point, I had fallen in love with chemical engineering as a field, and not only as a means to whatever challenge I wanted to solve, which was kind of by accident. Like I didn't know that I would like chemical engineering that much. But yeah, so I was looking for those two things specifically, and then that still wasn't that narrow of. I mean, it had certainly narrowed down a fair amount, but it still wasn't that narrow. So third, which I definitely want to make sure I hit on, I applied for the GEM Fellowship, which is a fellowship for minority students or underrepresented minority students who are interested in pursuing graduate degrees in engineering and some other STEM field. And know engineering education also is part of that. And so they provide a lot of fee waivers. So that really took the burden off of me financially, because it's very expensive to put out these applications. And so especially in our communities that are often resource limited, that fellowship is amazing, because you don't even have to, like, the fellowship is awarded much later. As long as you are a fellowship applicant, you can get a fee waiver for these universities. So I had I am an engineer, so I had lots of spreadsheets. So I had okay, research, chemical engineering, also a GEM school, so I can get a fee waiver. And then also when I was whittling down that list, I was looking at who are good mentors. So I was looking through their awards and who had won awards for teaching and for mentorship, because I knew for me that was something that I would really need as part of my journey, because you're with this person for 5 years.
Yes.
Well, I guess I should say that too. When you're looking at graduate schools, you are looking at professors specifically, professors that you're going to work with. In undergrad, you're looking for the school and the culture and the overall feel. But in graduate school, it's much, much more specific. So that was kind of how I went and made my my final list, which was still like 13 schools. But from talking to other people, that seems pretty standard. So
Okay. I love what you said about making that differentiator between what you're emphasizing and what you're looking for between graduate school and undergrad. It's funny because some of my students that have a little bit more they know what problems they want to solve, and they sometimes have an idea of what area they'd like to study. I do tell them, when you're looking at a school, to go on to the department, go to the faculty list, and see who's doing some kind of research that is of interest to you. What have they published? What is this someone you might want to do an internship with? And this doesn't work out for every student, but I said, if that's really what you're interested in, is there someone that's currently teaching there that you would love to do some work with? So wouldn't that be great if you could have that opportunity to do that? But I love how you said that that's even more important when you're going to graduate school, that you really need to do your research on who is going to be a good mentor for you. Because mentoring is key. I think mentoring is key, all along. But as we move through the education field, it becomes even more crucial to have the right mentor. Because having the wrong mentor can throw off your research, can throw off your whole path that you've put in place for yourself. So that is crucial. That is crucial. So how did you decide upon the University of Washington?
see, there are a lot of reasons why I chose the University of Washington. I think first and foremost was definitely because of my PI, Dr. Elizabeth Nance. Like I said earlier, she had just been part of my story for so long. So it was really amazing to have the opportunity to work with her after all this time, of her kind of of her trying to like help me establish the research that she was doing at my other university. But to finally just actually work with her and solve those challenges, because the way that we see engineering and neuroscience and kind of that beautiful marriage, we just see eye to eye, perfectly clear on that. So I knew that working with her, having her as my boss would just be awesome. And then of course she is an amazing mentor. And then talking with students in her lab, they just confirmed it. And then the lab culture is just amazing. So it was the research that I wanted to do, a professor that I clicked with, and was a good mentor. The lab culture was good. The students in the lab, they were happy. Which is they're happy. They're non-competitive. They're extremely collaborative. And then also, it was a big move, right? So I went from the southeast to the northwest, which was daunting. But if you are going to do a big move like that, this age, graduate school is a good time to do that. So yeah.
Okay. So what you mentioned a term that some folks may not be familiar with. I know a lot of young folks may not be familiar with it yet, but when you said PI, can you explain to them what a
I
PI
have to
is?
keep remembering. So PI stands for principal investigator, not a private investigator who is very different. But principal investigator is basically just your boss in the lab. Okay, but they're more than a boss because they're like you report to them, but they also kind of help you define your research and also help develop you as a scientist and in your two goals together. Well, this is not every PI's goal, but the good PIs, the goal is to get you a PhD. That is the goal. The science goals, yes, they exist, but the goal should be to get you your PhD. So that's definitely the stance that Dr. Nance takes. But yeah, so your PI kind of wears many hats, but overall it stands for principal investigator because they're like the main one that's like driving the science direction of the lab.
Okay. So in your bio, you talked about blood-brain barrier. So explain that to somebody, to a layperson who has no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah, I have to keep doing this because as the further you get in a field, the more bogged down you get with your technical terms, right? And so I'm always grateful for these opportunities to try to like, okay, what is the base? What is, because if you can't explain your research without all this jargon, I don't know if you really know what your research is. But basically, so you can see by my face, I love this aspect of the brain, the blood-brain barrier. I'm trying to get people to see it's not evil. So it's this highly selectively permeable membrane in the brain. Not membrane. Yes, this is this highly selectively permeable barrier in the brain that regulates entrance and exit of molecules. And so why that's important for us is that this is the main bottleneck for developing any kind of drugs or treatments for the brain, is because you have to get past this blood-brain barrier. Anything you put in the bloodstream, for it to penetrate into the brain tissue, it has to cross this blood-brain barrier, which is incredibly difficult. So there has been a lot of work, a fair amount of work in recent years using nanoparticles, trying to, or other methods, but our lab, we focus on the nanoparticle aspect, using that to encapsulate drugs and have them penetrate through the blood-brain barrier. But I'm specifically interested in what's happening at that interface. How are these nanoparticles traversing across the blood-brain barrier? And also, as a chemical engineer, this really gives me a lot of ability to bring in my chemical engineering expertise, looking at flow conditions, shear stress, how that affects the brain microenvironment, all this kind of stuff. So it's a really great place that has a lot of unanswered questions, and is perfectly suited for my background as a chemical engineer to study.
Okay. That sounds amazing. And like you said, it sounds, to a layperson, it may say, well, really, this is a small thing. But when you think about the magnitude of what you're doing and the importance of what you're doing, and it's that type of research that is going to lead to something that's going to be a breakthrough, that's going to benefit all of us.
Hopefully.
I love it. So I can say I knew her when she was just studying to get this done. So tell me, I don't know if there's a typical day, but what's a typical day like for a PhD student in chemical engineering?
It will change a lot based on the semesters. So if you were to ask me last semester, it was a ton of classes, ton of my fundamental chemical engineering classes, transport, thermo, another math, and then a little bit in the lab, a little bit of training, a little bit of basic techniques. But now in this semester, the classes have dialed way back. So it's like a class every now and then really more so heavy on the research. And then it'll just continue to, the classes will abate and it'll just be research. And so it's, very different depending on who you talk to, what the research is, and the stage of the research. So right now, my current daily life is we do animal studies. So I have been animal trained and interact with the animals. I also do a lot of cell work. So I call them my babies. So I have to go check on my cells, see what they're doing, give them new food, all that kind of stuff, which I love, absolutely love. And then, so I don't know what my cells are doing right now. They are alive and they are thriving, but I don't know what they're doing. Because I'm a first year and I know nothing. So it's a lot of, okay, cool. Then I go home and try to figure out what's happening. And I'm like, okay, that's what's happening. Go back. So it's a lot of, These days I'm getting paid to learn. I'm getting paid to discover. And I have a lot of freedom to, kind of explore any avenue. Okay. For example, we have the cell types we're trying to grow are astrocytes, which I call my starry babies. But then we noticed that there were other cells in our dish. And so my PI was like, take them out, let's culture them, let's see what happens. So now that we've got squatty boys, which instead of having these very branched star cells, they are squat, round cells. Okay. Are currently trying to identify, but that's fun, right? Like, right. See what happens. So
I know lab work sounds absolutely fascinating. I wasn't. I remember my, what was it? High school biology class. If I had probably had that biology teacher maybe earlier, that would have been, because she was magnificent. She had a way of turning biology into something that was just so interesting, so intriguing. We did labs all the time, and she was just a really great teacher. Miss Shirley Cook, I'll never forget her. She was, I mean, that's been a long time ago for me, but I still remember her name like it was yesterday, because she made the class so relevant, even for people who didn't think they were going to be interested in that particular work. Now, one of the things I want to go back to, you mentioned the GEM scholarship, and I know that you have been awarded quite a few scholarships. I was going through the list and I said, oh my goodness. So I have the the North Carolina State Engineer Your Experience Grand Challenge Research Grant, the Forrest O. and Sandra Mixon Jr. RTI Scholarship, the Edna Loretta Newsman Scholarship, the Duke Energy Annual Diversity Scholarship, the Lord Corporation Scholarship, the Michael B. Christie Memorial Scholarship, the Duke Energy Freshman Scholarship, and more. So tell me about, how do you put yourself in a position that you're awarded all of these scholarships? What advice would you give to students who are hoping to follow in your footsteps?
Yeah, so I guess that's one thing I probably should have prefaced with. So the reason why I have so much freedom in the lab to kind of see what happens is because I have my own funding. I have, in addition to the GEM Fellowship, I have the NSF GRFP, which is the National Science Foundation Graduate Research Fellowship, which really gives me a lot of freedom to be able to just go and explore, because I'm bringing in my own funding as opposed to just being funded by the lab. I'm also contractually obligated to state that I also have the ARCS Fellowship. I signed something that said I have to mention it. So I also have that. But basically, it's telling stories, being a storyteller, tying all of your experiences together in a way that brings in what you want to do. And not everything that you do may actually be purposeful, but you write it such that it's purposeful. So you kind of like find the common threads through your experiences, and then just tell them in a compelling manner. And really, like, I don't know, I think almost any scientific pursuit has these very broad impacts to broadly that have the ability to affect like a lot of change in a lot of different areas. So the better you are at communicating how your work in this small subsect of science affects things on a large scale, kind of the better chances you have at some of these funding agencies. But
Okay.
yeah, like they're funding your science and they're also funding you. So everyone definitely just kind of tie things together instead of like a laundry list, like, and then I did this, and then I did this, and then
Right.
I did this, because you have your resume, but like, why? What did you enjoy from it? What experiences did you have? Those types of
Okay.
things.
Okay. So I can hear some of my students now saying, especially my younger folks who haven't even graduated from high school yet. They're probably saying, so if you didn't have all of these scholarships and this funding, what would you have to be doing in order to, so how would you be able to go to school?
The- I can't really speak to that because I did get these scholarships.
Right. Okay.
But they did certainly help. Like I said, I definitely would have had a lot more limitations applying to grad school without the GEM application
Okay.
process. So, yeah, I can't really speak to the experience without the funding because I did have the funding, but I can only say that the funding is definitely very helpful. I think I shouldn't bring it up yet, should I? But
Well,
in
you
in
can.
a book that I read, um, Hooded: The Black Girl's Guide to the PhD, the author actually does discuss
Well,
some of the trials and tribulations with trying to obtain funding and kind of how you can navigate the grad school process without funding. We don't really talk about the undergrad process as much, but definitely the grad process. You can subsidize your income. Okay, subsidize. Add to your income with TA ships, and then I am also working another job. I'm still working with the Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Laboratory, which I got that job through the GEM Fellowship, but I have continued working that job, which kind of helps my income as a struggling grad student as well. You can definitely have side jobs. I worked through undergrad as well. So even though I did have scholarships, I also worked as an engineering ambassador and as a like a resident advisor, which also brought me income to
okay.
help with books and things. So and there's also a number of scholarships to see if you can apply for. So there's like the Goodnight Scholar. Okay, this is specific to NC State, but there are scholarships that you may fall into based on your background, those types of things. Basically, there are agencies that are trying to give money.
Right.
So just really use your resources to try to find those agencies and things that you are qualified for. So.
Yeah, and that is so important. I noticed you were mentioning the Goodnight Scholarship, which is specific to NC State, but I know another person that I had as a guest, Jalen McGee. He was a recipient of the Goodnight Scholarship when during his time at NC State. But again, let me hold up the book. So you folks that know me know that I always ask guests if they have a book. If not, I try to find one that goes along with their topic. And this is the one that Sydney referred to. It's Hooded: A Black Girl's Guide to the PhD by Dr. Malika Grayson. And I've actually, it's so funny. I said, when I saw that on your form, I said, oh, let me order this and see if I can get it read before I meet with her. And again, it was really interesting with her talking about getting funding and having to work as a teacher's assistant if you don't have that funding, and that gives you less time to focus on your research. So doing what you did, doing that work up front, looking for the fellowships and the scholarships and the funding now allow you to spend even more time dedicated to your research. And that's really what you want to be able to do when you're in graduate school, to really focus on your research as much as possible. Because if you're doing all those other things, it does take time away.
Mhm.
And it makes for a very tired person.
It's doable, but yes.
Yes, makes for a very tired person. So for those of you who maybe want to reach out to Sydney to see to learn more about her and to get more information, here's her social media handles. You can definitely connect with her on LinkedIn, as I was able to do. Follow her on Instagram, and you see her handle there. Or you can follow her on Twitter. And for those young folks, and even some of you older folks who are thinking about a career in engineering, or maybe thinking about a career change, definitely reach out there, see what Sydney has to say on her social media, and make sure that you use this information in a way that's going to help you. And I want to make sure that you also have the URL to Sydney did a TEDx Teen Talk, link unlikely things. And I had the pleasure of watching it, and I'm like, oh my goodness, what it's so exciting. So tell me, how did that come about? How did that come about that you had the opportunity to do a TEDx Teen Talk?
It was so crazy. So I had actually done, so I'd already done the Super Bowl commercial, which was also crazy. So the woman that did the camp, throwing it all the way back to middle school, who I had reached out to and networked with, her name was Dr. Laura Bottomley. She's a fellow of the National Academy of Engineering. So Chevron said, we want to make a spotlight or help increase the number of women in STEM. How do we do that? They reached out to the National Academy. He reached out to Dr. Bottomley, and she said, tell real stories. And they said, well, whose story should we tell? And then she immediately thought of me, just because we had already been talking. And, you know, I've had this crazy, I want to help the brain with engineering thing for so long. So Ted saw the commercial that we'd done with Chevron, and they said, hey, can you expound upon this for 9 to 10 minutes? Also, we need it in 5 days.
Oh.
So it just so happened that I had thought, what if I did a TEDx talk? And so I had kind of had some thoughts jotted down, but I was like, oh, I'm not going to apply, whatever. And so the opportunity came, and because I was prepared, I had some stuff already, and I was like, oh, sure, I can totally put that together in 5 days. And so they said, great, we're sending the plane tickets now. We're going to book you. So it really, usually you have 2 months to prepare a TEDx talk, but they reached out. They were like, hey, like, we were going over the lineup. We needed somebody in STEM. We came across you. Can you do this? And I was like, yes. So I wrote it in a couple days. We flew out. I'd only practiced it once before I had given it on stage. So I think that's another reason. I guess it was good. It was because it was just kind of me, you know, authentically. But yeah, so I forgot the exact verbiage of the quote, but it's like success equals opportunity plus preparation. And so when the opportunity came, because I was prepared, I was able to jump on it.
Yes. So. Yes. So folks out there, do you hear that? Start writing your TED Talks now, because you never know. You never know when you may be asked to come on and do one. And I just watching that, I'm like, oh my God, this is amazing. Look at this. Look at this young girl out here doing it. But I love what you said about how you were preparing for something. You didn't know quite what it was, but you were going to be prepared so that when that opportunity came up, you were going to be ready. And so again, folks that are listening to this, it's all about preparation. It's not about waiting until something falls in your lap. You know, you don't know what the opportunity is going to be, but if you plan for it, prepare for it, you get opportunities like Sydney had in order to be able to do this. So, Sydney, what advice would you give to a young person, especially a female who was interested in entering a STEM field?
So I'm going to give some advice. It's going to sound. Oh, is there on your end as well?
Yeah, I hear it a little bit. Okay. I don't know why it's doing that now.
Okay, I think it's gone. Okay, so I'm going to give some advice that's going to sound a little bit backwards at first, but it was advice that I think I would have definitely appreciated coming into STEM. So it's okay that it's hard. I think we, you know, in the very few representations of STEM that we have in the media, it's Tony Stark goes into the lab for 2 minutes and then, oh my God, I've solved time travel. Oh my God, like immediately. And so I think there's kind of this disconnect with, oh, this is really difficult. I should be getting this a lot quicker. I must not be cut out for STEM. And especially as Black women, the imposter syndrome just compounds right? So my advice is it's okay that it's hard. It's okay. It's hard and you can do hard things and you'll grow and you'll figure out how to do it. Right. So like just the fact that it's hard does not mean that you are not capable. It does not mean that this field is not for you. So that's kind of like my biggest thing to kind of keep in mind. Like if you love it,
Right.
So
Right. I love that advice because it's so funny because our guest last week, Trinity Wilson, um, talked about when she was attending undergrad and how she felt sometimes that she had to struggle a little bit with some of the work, but she talked about, yeah, it's hard, but you don't give up. You go and get help, and you know, if you have to go to if you're going to office hours and tutoring and
I
whatever
stayed
else.
in office hours. I literally stayed there. Stayed
Okay.
there. Whatever office hours was a part of my calendar. It was an
Okay.
event, and I would sit there and I would listen to people's questions. I'm like, oh, I didn't even think of that question. And write down So yeah, I guess that's another piece of advice is it's okay. I think there's like the stigma with office hours is for like if you're dumb. Like shoot, I'll be dumb. There are gems that come out of office hours, and then if it comes down to oh man, I am this close. That professor has seen your face. They know that this student puts in the work. They put in the effort. So maybe we're gonna put the curve at whatever their grade is, and that has happened. He's like, coincidentally, the cutoff was exactly the grade that I had. But
and
yeah,
I think it's so important. See, again, when we were talking about jargon and language, young folks don't know the language of college, so sometimes they don't understand what office hours are. I remember somebody telling me that they thought office hours meant that was when the professor was in their office to do their work. And I'm like, no, that's when you should be in there. And don't feel like, you know, if I go into office hours that I'm bugging the professor or I'm wasting their time because I don't have a specific question. No, you go in there, that's another way of networking. That professor may or professors may become your mentors, you know, champions in your corner. They could be your best advocates. And just what you said, just from a practical point of view, you're going to office hours, they see your face on a regular basis. And then when they're grading and there's that opportunity to bump your grade up a little bit, they say, oh, wait a minute, this person came to every office hour session I had. And didn't just, you know, come and say, hey, how you doing? I mean, they were there paying attention and listening and taking notes. So again, it is so important that people understand why office hours are important. And folks, undergrad, graduate, whatever level, office hours are important. But definitely as undergrads, you need to understand the importance of doing something like attending office hours because it really is important. Really
and
is.
I will say something else just for the high school audiences too. So something that I did, which I don't think is I mean, I wouldn't say it's common, but it's not commonly advertised from STEM. So I did not rush through my maths, specifically senior year. So I had come from when I came into high school, I was coming from a school that didn't have Common Core. We just had normal algebra, geometry, whatever, and there were gaps that I had because of that shift in the maths. So I had the opportunity senior year to jump straight to Calc 1 and Calc 2, or take a year-long Calc 1 class and really get the basics down before going to college. I chose that route and was so much better for it, right? Like I think there's like this, I have to like load up on every single AP and just get through and the fundamentals, right? Making sure that if you have the option to, you know, be prepared for college, but you don't have to rush through. You can slow it down, really make sure you get the fundamentals. Because I mean, for me, I needed that. I needed that calc fundamentals because it kept on showing up again and again and again and again.
Right.
So if there is an opportunity, there is no shame in taking a little step back and really making sure that you get those fundamentals, especially in math. So
Oh, that is such great advice, because sometimes when we're talking to our students and or my colleagues are asking questions. Well, this is my student's schedule. This is what they're looking at taking next year, and sometimes it's like, oh my goodness, that's a lot of APs, and like how many APs are enough? And
Mhm.
and then you're talking to kids and they're up until 3 and 4 in the morning doing homework because they've loaded themselves up with classes that they think if they don't take those, they're not getting into college at all anywhere in the United States or anywhere close by. So I love that you talked to them about getting the fundamentals. When you have that opportunity to really dig deep into a particular subject, as long as you're on track
Right.
to meet your graduation requirements, to meet the requirements for schools that you're interested in. You
Mhm.
don't have to load yourself up to the point where you're just like, oh my God. So I
And
love that.
because I did work with recruiting and admissions at NC State, because not every AP is useful,
Mm,
right? So what you can do is you can look at the degree audit of, let's say you're interested in 3 or 4 majors, right? Look at those degree audits and look at what APs can correlate with those classes.
okay.
Take those APs. You don't, if you're taking I'm not, okay, I'm not gonna AP this, AP that, AP that, AP, maybe 2 of those are relevant to your major and you can get credit for. But these 2, you were just staying up late for no reason. You didn't need them for your major, right?
Okay.
So you have to be very strategic. So for me, taking AP Bio was huge for my major. And it gave me 2 semesters college worth of credit. And then
Okay.
the AP Calc was extremely helpful, right? But I didn't need AP Gov. I didn't need AP Senior English, only AP Junior English, right? So if you can, this is public information. You can look
Mhm.
at the which APs correlate with which classes, and then you can look at the degree audits, which classes are required for your major, and that's how you can kind of strategize which APs are necessary and which ones am I just taking because I think that I have to take them to get in anywhere.
Right. That's such great advice, Sydney, because again, students are making themselves crazy sometimes, um, trying to play the strategy game, and it doesn't
Because there
always
is a
work.
strategy to it, but the strategy is not take every single AP ever
Right.
offered.
Right. This has been so wonderful. So, for folks who were able to join in, or for those who are going to watch this on the replay, we are here today with Sydney Floryanzia, who is a PhD student in chemical engineering at the University of Washington. If you have a young person that you know who may be interested in STEM, or you want them to seriously consider STEM, please make sure that they have time to sit down and watch this and listen to Sydney's conversation. They can also follow her on social media. They can connect with her on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Twitter, and can find out more about her journey to chemical engineering. And Sydney had the opportunity to do a TEDx Teen Talk called Link Unlikely Things. And you can find it here at this URL, or you can just Google her name and do TEDx Teen, and it will come up. That's how I found it the first time. So please, 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 folks, use this information, share this information, because it's so important that we start having more folks that look like us in all these different spaces. And representation matters. It's more than just a hashtag. It needs to be a way of life. It needs to be something that, as time goes on, it's not an issue. But it's been an issue forever. Hasn't changed much yet in different fields. So hopefully you'll get something from this. You'll be able to use this information. Teachers, share this with the young folks in your classroom. Parents, show this, sit down and watch this with your kids. If you're thinking about getting a PhD, please, Hood It, A Black Girl's Guide to the PhD by Dr. Malika Grayson has some wonderful tips and strategies that you could use. It's so important. Learn from the lessons of others. Don't go out there and, make the same mistakes, or have these thoughts about, oh, this isn't possible for me, you're hearing it right here. We have, in another few years, we'll have Dr. Floryanzia, who will be out there making all kinds of wonderful discoveries for us that will help all of us. So, Sydney, thank you so much for coming on this evening. I really, really appreciate it. I know you probably have tons of work that you could be doing. Folks, I will be here next Monday, 7 p.m. Eastern Time, with another guest. So make sure you check us out. Sydney, just stay on for a second. And folks, as I said, I will see you next Monday. Don't forget to register for the Black College Awareness Fair. That is this Monday. This Monday, this coming Saturday, 1 p.m. Eastern Time. And you can find that information on the Palo Altos AKA's Instagram page. And you can also find that information on my Facebook page at Steps to the Future. So thank you, everyone. Take care. And I will definitely see you next Monday.